Comic book fans, and here is the second part of my chat with Rick Morgan, the comic book guy. And in this part of the chat, we're talking about how the comic industry has changed over the last 30 years, how it's changed for the better in some cases, and how it's changed for the worse in others. Enjoy. My next question is, so I recently did a video the other day. I found my old, I went to the UK Comic Art Convention in 1990, right? So that's 31 years ago. And I got this out and I had a look at it. And I was thinking, right, what things are better in the comics industry since 1990 and what things are worse? So I'm going to ask you two things that you think are better and two things that you think are worse. From the
that's interesting.
You were around in 1990. So
it's interesting you say that. I had a similar reflection because I went to comic book convention yesterday and got the autograph of a man named Randy Amberland, who was the inker on Amazing Spider-Man from like 318 to like 401 or something.
Okay.
And I have his my son's a Carnage and a Venom fan, so we went and met him and he drew a Carnage for my son. And I reflected that I have an autograph from you, sir, on an original page of Spider-Man art from 1991 October. That makes it 30 years ago this month that I first saw you, and have been getting your autographs since then. So I had the reflection, on that same thing. So the better things are a little bit easier for me than the worst, because worse is it's hard to represent. It's hard to like, worse is so subjective. I guess better is too, but better is representation in comics has changed a lot. Just the content of the comic books is better for people that don't look like you and me, old white guys, right? It is. So if you are a person of color, or you're maybe handicapped or from a different country, it is better for you. You can read it and identify with a comic book character much easier than you could. Now, there was a presumably gay person in Alpha Flight, and there were a few branches into it, even as far back as Black Panther, right? But the overall representation is a lot better. It was a big deal that Peter Parker was who he was and not a square jawed hero. Why? Because of representation. Because he was the target audience. He was the nerdy kid in high school that was getting pushed around, and people flocked to it because he looked like them, right?
Yeah.
And we're sort of extending that. That's great. Representation is fantastic.
And I'm going to come in with my what's better as well, because it's very similar to yours. So when I got this out, one of the things this has in it, it's got a list of all the people that pre-registered for the convention. Okay. And my name's in there.
Oh, nice.
And I went through that. And there's about 500 or 600 people, 15 women.
Whoa.
Now, I'm going to a convention up in Yorkshire in November. And also the artists represent, so all the artists did a piece of artwork and put them in here, and they were then auctioned for charity. So there's about 40 or 50 different pieces of artwork. Number of female artists, 0. Now, I bet you when I go to the comic convention in November, more than 3% of the people there will be female. And I've already looked at the guest list, and about 40% of the artists and writers there are female. That is a great change, both in terms of the creators, the diversity of the creators is much, much better. And also the diversity of comic fans. Back in 1990, 3% of the population at that convention probably were women. Whereas I bet you it's more like 30 or 40% when I go to the one in November.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's similar to what I was going to say as another pro, is that is the whole world's acceptance of comic books is a lot different than it was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If I were to go back into the 80s, like I said, man, like I was remembering like my comic conventions were the break room at a Red Lion hotel, and it was just a bunch of guys trading comic books with each other, telling the same old stories, a backpack full of books, trying to get somebody to sign them. But now, I mean, first of all, I want to go back and tell you, Rick, I want to have a time machine. I'm going to slap myself as a younger person. Say, look, man, these things are going to be awesome in the future. There's going to be cosplay everywhere.
Yeah.
There's going to be women who aren't even paid to be here running around in spandex everywhere. You're like, people, when you tell people you collect comic books, they're going to think you're cool.
Yeah.
They're going to think, because it was different. Like people say, oh, you're a nerd. Haha. We say it kind of a funny, joking way. It was very derogatory back. It wasn't like, it was something you kept to yourself. Yeah, you kept it to yourself because people didn't, like right now, it's a little bit cool to say you're a nerd. You're
Yeah.
nerdy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
fun, but
Oh,
it wasn't, it wasn't even semi-cool back. It wasn't like a fun, cool, like way to be nerdy. And
Just want to
you kept
read
it to yourself now.
I just want to
Yeah.
read this, which was in this convention brochure. And it's done by, it's a satirical comic at the time. Put this in here. It says, stop and look at yourself. What do you think you look like, you pathetic, sad individuals, as you sit there reading your precious comics and slotting them into those silly plastic bags? Don't you ever stop to consider exactly why it is girls don't want to go out with you? Sure, the fact you don't wash regularly could have something to do with it. Obesity may play a part. Perhaps your diet of crisps and toe and cheese footballs needs looking at. But dare we suggest that this dismal obsession with comics is the real problem? Let's face it, comics are for kids, sexual perverts, and people who can't read properly. So why don't you just grow up and act your age?
Whoa.
Which was, that was done as a, but that was the comic fans, wasn't it?
I really almost said people had an image of a potato chip munching like Hot Pocket for breakfast guy down in his mother's basement looking for pictures of girls in their comic books. It's not quite, it's like sort of social acceptable, because in the 90s too, in the middle, they had women with like huge boobs, like it was like ridiculous back then, right? And they've toned it down quite a bit, but somewhat, not all of it. But yeah, you're right. Exactly, the image of who reads a comic book, and part of it is because the best movies, like one of the most money-making movies in the world, and even on Disney Plus, are comic book movies.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the comic book movies of my age were really stupid.
Yeah, they were.
And they were super kitschy, and we just didn't have any kind of good way to express this. And even from when I was young, people still have always, like, people haven't seen me in 30 years, like, come up and they still associate me with comic books. But it's a different way, right? They don't feel sort of sorry for me like they did, like that sad little man, like trying to find a special book. Like, you like your little books, little buddy, it's okay, kind of thing, to like, oh, wow, your books are, the first thing they say is how much they're worth, right? Because everybody hears, oh, it must be worth all these dollars. So I said, no, it's not worth dollars. It's worth my heart. It's like, how much, they say, how much would you sell these comics for? I said, I don't know, how much would you sell your kids for?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to sell them, right? It's not going to happen. And so my attachment and my affection for this hobby and what I do supersedes that world of Marvel movies and Disney movies and value of books and plastic slabs on the wall. I'm at a different level, right? But I'm old school. So those are some things that are better. Like, it has changed in the way it's socially acceptable, and the comics have changed to reflect the diverse community of people, not the crisp munching weirdos in their basement. Like you're saying, it's not that image anymore. It's like regular people. But that's who's collecting comics. I don't know who's reading comics, right? Because if they're in a plastic box, I was buying comic books yesterday, and I said, I want to buy I bought a couple of Strange Tales books yesterday because I'm hunting down these ones here, these early appearances of Spider-Man that aren't in his native book, right? And so I'm getting all of them. And I'm like, wow, somebody said, oh, you want these here? Do you want them in the slab, the graded? I'm like, well, how am I going to read them if they're in the slab? He said, well, you don't. I'm like, well, then I don't want the slab. I want it. What am I going to do with this? Is this just to look at? So, and that's a showstopper for me. I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's something that's worse. That's my first of the worst. My first of the worst is people aren't reading the books. At least people aren't reading the books in a slab. That's one of my how things have gotten worse. Is this isn't has become less for the story. Now, I'm not saying they're not reading them digitally, but reading a digital comic is kind of like taking a mannequin on a date to the movies to me, right? It's like, what are you doing with this thing, right? It's because this is, to me, this is a visceral sort of like a smells like grandma's hugs, as I always say, kind of thing. Like reading it and touching it and the smell and the feel is for me, to me, that's just universally worse. Like if people buy a book and they're afraid to read it, and they put it in a plastic bag and they mount it on the wall immediately. Well, that's, to me, that's worse.
But I think there's I think there's 4 reasons why I buy comic books. And I sort of analysed it. I sort of looked at the comics that I bought and said, well, you know, why have I bought these comics? And I'm so 30. I think there's the collector in me, like you. I think you're a much higher percentage collector than that. You're sort of probably 100% collector. I'm sort of about 30-40% collector. I like to complete things. I like to have a complete run. I want to read the whole story. And that's sort of about 30-40% of the time why I buy comics. Another sort of 30% of the time is I do like and I always have, even back in the 1990s, always liked the investment potential. You know, is it going to go up in value a bit? You know, and this was before slabbing. And then the rest of it, you know, I buy a comic because I like the art. And sometimes I'll buy it because I like the story, you know. So I'm probably 30-30, 20-20. So I'm a mixture of the 4. Now, when I can find one that hits all 4, you know, I like the art, I like the story, it's part of the collection, and I think it's going to go up in value. It's like, you know, jackpot. Now, what I think's happened since, if I go back to 1990, most of those people at that convention were collectors. Yeah. They were buying for the art and for the story and for, you know, like you saying, you want to, they're close to your heart. Now there's far more of the people who are just pure investors in the market. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah. Well, just watch the YouTube videos.
I'm going to buy an X-Men one for $30,000, and in 2 years' time, I can sell it for $100,000. You know, and they're never going to open it. They're not going to read it. It's going to sit in a bank vault somewhere. You know, and they're going to treble their money in 3 years or whatever. You know, those people didn't exist in 1990.
Right. I go back and forth on whether that's, you know, good or bad. To me, it's a negative because it taints the whole thing. But I love that there are more people into the hobby, even if it's for more venal reasons, right? For just to make more money, right? I like it, or maybe these people just want to make YouTube videos about it and make money on their YouTube. I mean, if that's what's keeping it alive, then so be it. There are room for everybody, but I think I think the long-term implications are that they're all supported. All those people making videos, people selling stuff.
Yeah.
The foundation of that is people who want to buy them, right?
Yeah.
And if they want to buy them to sell them, that population is going to run out. If there isn't a foundation of people who want to have and read the books, and who are willing to pay big bucks to have and read a book. I've paid sums of money to buy comic books that I could not have dreamed of 30 years ago. I would never have thought. It's just more money than I made in a year, obviously, like several years, 30 years ago. I wouldn't have thought it possible, right? But that's, once I die, once I'm gone, I'm pretty sure my kids are not going to spend that kind of money on comic books, even like today's, without any inflation.
No, well, they'll probably buy a house with your comic books.
That's what they keep telling me. They keep telling me, like they keep dividing them up different ways. Like, yeah, they'll buy several, in fact. Well, you know, the thing is, I think that's supporting that foundation. There's so many people trying to trick each other out of $1 that are going to keep, you know, sustain everything, right?
Are they tricking each other, or is it just market economy? You know, it's buying and selling, isn't it?
It is, but I say trick in the sense that here's why I say it. It's not trick in the sense of like blue chip, like Giant Size X-Men #1 or Amazing Fantasy #1. Those are the slope, and that's not a trick. That's just investment. It's trick when you're trying to get this information. You're watching Twitter and you say there's gonna be an Alpha Flight movie because some hint you saw.
Oh yeah,
and you try to buy it and then sell it really quickly to somebody else who's the next guy who might try to, you're trying to get in the head of the spec game to trick the next guy who's going to try to fix the final guy, try to fix the final. You're all trying, everybody's trying to, when I say trick, I mean to get the money out of the last guy who might actually be interested in Alpha Flight and want to collect it. You're trying to make the price so high at the very end that this person who might be interested in Alpha Flight can't buy it anymore. So therefore you're tricked because everybody's gotten money from each other.
Yeah, I call that market manipulation, and that goes on. You know,
that's exactly that.
These YouTubers out there sat with a box of 200 of a certain comic, you know, and they'll put out the hype about, you know, why it's special and why people should be buying it, you know, and they bought them for $5 a book and they're now selling them for $100 a book. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's probably a better word for it. My word for trick is the repeated hype, right? Generating hype and then using that hype to make money so that that person who also gets the idea that they're going to make money. And that's why it's a trick, because one of you has to end up with the book and you hope it's the person who really ended up liking it, but it may be the person it's just like that Amway, like those pyramid schemes, right? Of like who's going to end up with it when the market stops, right? Or when the movie never comes out. Like Moon Knight happened to Moon Knight recently. Moon Knight, nobody cared about Moon Knight recently at all. It was like a Target version of Batman, you know. And so I loved Moon Knight when I was a kid. The first series, the rest of them were terrible. But the price on that has gone crazy. The Werewolf by Night 32. I actually sold mine earlier this year because I don't really care about Moon Knight anymore, but I have like all these Moon Knight books, and someone offered me, I think, like $3,800 or $3,900 for my Werewolf. I'm like, yeah, you can have it, dude. I don't care. So it's like, I think I have, like, I'm looking up here. I just found like in a box. I wasn't even really paying attention. And I looked at one of my old boxes and I found like a couple of these Marvel Spotlight, these ones here.
Yeah. Oh yes.
I didn't even put them in bags. You know, they're just sitting in my box. It's like from a long time ago. Yeah, but the hype is crazy. Like, it hasn't even come out yet. We don't even know if it's any good yet. We know nothing about it.
Well, we haven't had a trailer. We haven't even had a trailer.
Yeah. I know, but people are going crazy for it. So to me, to my heart, I think that's a detriment when that's the conversation, right? The conversation is what's going to come out next and how do we, and then this train of people trying to outpace each other. Now, is there room for everybody who wants to do whatever they want in this industry? I say yes, but why do I say it's bad if everyone's happy and making money of their own? I say it's bad for the one kid who actually decides he does like Moon Knight from watching the series and says, hey mom, can you take me to the comic book store? And I would like to buy some Moon Knight comic books. And you know what? Oh, they're so good. I would like to go get some of these older ones and read them too. Oh, guess what, kid? They just the best one went from a semi-available, like $900 to $10,000 in the last few months because everyone was trying to make sure that you couldn't get it or whatever. You know, that's my perspective. Of course, it's only my perspective, and there's room for everybody in the industry, but that's kind of how I see it. I cannot, as a fully funded male with, you know, all the money I could want right now, could not start collecting comic books, Spider-Man comic books today and reasonably expect to get all 875 issues in Amazing Fantasy 15. The cost of that today would be, I just couldn't do it. It would be hopeless, right? To do that, I think. So as a kid, I'm thinking about a younger version of myself who's 9 and says, oh, hey mom, I'd like to read some Batman books. Hey, I would like to get all the Batman books. I'd just say, forget it. You're just never going to get all the Batman books. It's never going to happen for you. Don't even try, right? I would say you need to go to like Nightwing or something, right? Anyway, that to me, it's a detriment. Obviously, it's hugely popular. It's not a detriment to everybody because the first 30 videos in my feed every morning on YouTube are about comic book market speculation, hot 10, whatever. So everybody's into it, right? To me, it's a detriment. To other people, it's probably positive.
Yeah. No, that's right. Fair enough. I mean, my final one, and it's always difficult to put this alongside the one that I did as a positive, which is, you know, and you did, which is diversity in comics and and in the comic fan base, which is, I don't like it when what I call the woke wagon of righteousness rolls in. Suddenly we're going to rewrite some of these characters who've been around 30 years, and suddenly they're going to change sex, or they're going to have a different sexual orientation. But I don't mind it when they introduce new characters like that, but when there's an old character who is established and they take them and they rewrite them as something completely different, I don't like it.
I'm with you 100% on that. And then we call them social justice warriors here, SJWs. And I'm with you 100%. Here's an example, right? And what they're doing is they're I call it lazy writing. You're too lazy to make your own character, so you co-opt one of mine, or their favorite one, right? Change it. So I'm hopeful and happy that new characters of all different representations come into the market.
Yeah.
I'm super unhappy when it take one of my characters and change it. Now, I don't even like Miles Morales Spider-Man at all, right? Because I know it's awful to say that, because everybody else loves it, loves the cartoon and the movie. He's a likable character and a good guy. Absolutely hate it. Now, to be fair, I didn't even like Ben Reilly's Spider-Man. I didn't even like it when anybody else. I don't like it when Spinnerette, like Mary Jane, was being Spider-Man, because that's my boy, right? It's like, I don't want anybody else calling themselves Spider-Man for any reason. I didn't even like Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman when it came out, because I thought it was too derivative. So I'm not going to be happy in any case. When you take another guy, it's completely different powers, similar suit, and you just call him also Spider-Man, it's just, you are too lazy to make your own character. You're co-opting mine, using the name to get people interested. Am I happy that there is a guy looks like Miles Morales as a superhero doing stuff? Yeah, I'm super happy. Not happy at all that they call him Spider-Man. I just don't like it. I think it's lazy writing. So make your own hero.
Yeah.
And let him stand in his own stuff. Don't take mine and change it, right? Even though mine still exists, maybe I'm being selfish. I feel the water's polluted and diluted with, there's Spider-Mans, everything. There's like 3 Spider-Women. There's a whole Spider-Men thing. There's the Spider-Man Noir. I was like, dude, come on. How lazy are you? Like, make your own stupid characters. It's just, it's just too much. I mean, I think this is going to continue as long as it works, right?
Yeah, exactly.
People say, oh, there's a different version of this person, I want it, and then all of a sudden you have to buy all the different versions. There's even Silk, right? There's another, she was bitten by the same spider, and they put it in, they retconned it, so she was bitten by the same spider as the same. I'm like, are you serious? Come on, like, please. Really? I mean, how long do you spend in the right, who sits around the table and say, hey, we have to sit, I just imagine what this meeting is like. Maybe it's a Zoom meeting. They're like, hey, I got this new idea. It's going to sound a lot like Spider-Man, only the same spider bit 30 people, and we didn't know anything about him till now. And we're going to call them, let's just call him Spider-Man. That's right. Like, seriously? Like, what has happened to your brain that you can't come up with your own? Like, why do you call yourself a writer? Like, what kind of creator are you? You're definitely no Edgar Rice Burroughs or Isaac Asimov or something. Like, you just come up with your own stuff.
Did Stanley ever have to reinvent Spider-Man? No, he didn't. He went off and did, something else. He thought of a new idea.
Weekly, right?
Weekly.
Yeah, exactly. But it's lazy when you say, like, even like, let's say Star Wars. It's like, okay, well, let's make a new character. Let's juice up the Star Wars a little bit. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to take a stormtrooper and we're going to make I don't know, let's make them metal and call them like metal troopers. Like, oh, come on. Come up. There's a whole world. You've literally been given an entire universe to play with. Don't just make them a different color and then put them out.
Race
Exactly. It's just lazy. It's just lazy stuff, right? And people like it, and I'm glad people like it, because maybe it's their introduction, right? Maybe they're seeing. It's like when they release like a movie every 5 years. It's like a Halloween type or a Friday the 13th type scary movie. It's like, oh, there's this new movie, we're going to call it, something else, and it's going to be the same thing. The same stupid teenagers try to start the car and it won't start, and they run into it's like, it's for a new audience that wasn't born yet, but they feel like it's special and new for them because they're not. It's maybe harder for them to get into like the old stuff, right? Yeah, or maybe it's just too weird. They feel like they need something that's just for them. And maybe that's what these are. Maybe these are these same characters that are sort of recycled just for them in a new way. And they keep starting comic, but I got one more thing that I don't like about comic books. And this is going to be my absolute favorite that's just going to stick with me. Stop starting things over at number one all the time. It drives me crazy. Stop doing it. We're on volume 5 of Amazing Spider-Man, and they count Renew Your Vows and the Superior Spider-Man as also in the continuity. Don't do it anymore. We know that number 1 sell great. Like number 1 of anything sells great, and then number 2, they don't hardly print any of it. We all get it. We know you're doing it for money.
But it's lack of imagination,
please
again, isn't
stop.
it? How am I going to boost sales? Let's stop it and start it again. For goodness sake.
Oh my God. How many times have they started X-Men? Like in Spider-Man went through 1 through 441. And then they stopped and made a volume 2, and they started it over again at 500 to like 700. It's like, it is so hard. I mean, I don't do it just for that, like, just philosophically, it hurts me because it's like, why do it? Like, why are you doing this? Don't do it anymore. Right. I see if you stop and you didn't print it for 10 years, you start again, maybe that's a volume 2, but don't stop it. And then the next week there's another number 1.
My favorite one was Fantastic Four, where they stopped it, and then they started it again. And then they decided actually that they were approaching issue 1000, I think it was, if you added them all up together. So they went back to the old legacy numbering. So they could get.
Well, I'm the author. I'm the author of the continuity of much of, not all of, but some significant portion of the Wikipedia page that keeps the Spider-Man numbering going. I went in and keep all that. I'm like the person who straightens that out to keep the continuity.
You're the legacy numberer.
Yeah, like I put that stuff in there and I change. I'm not the only one. There's other people fix me when I make errors and stuff, but that is exactly what when they get to they want a number 1, so they want to boost sales. They get up to a century issue or a special issue, and then they print. Oh, here's the other thing. Here's the last thing. 45 variants of comic book cover. Like,
God,
that's
on my list. I've got that variants. It's manufactured scarcity. That's all they're doing. It's part of the market manipulation thing again. If you want to go and get a Spider-Man 31, which I did, that is scarce because it's an old book. Kids used to have it, and it is genuinely scarce book. It is not the same as when you do a 1 in 100 variant cover that you produced last week. That is manufactured scarcity. It is manipulating the market. Right.
Yeah, and when you say to someone, it's even hard. Like, I want to buy a Spider-Man 31. Actually, incidentally, I just mailed one off to a guy. I gave him to him for free just the other day from my site, but it's a great book. But let's say I wanted to get Spider-Man 31 and I search for it. Amazing Spider-Man 31. Yeah. Well, guess what? There's 4 of them now. They're all called Amazing Spider-Man 31. And they're not even really distinguished by volume. Right. You don't know which one you want. Like, you have to get a code and decrypt, which 31 you want. And it's so awful. Then if I want a book, right? If someone sends to me, I'm looking for a book, let's say it's a X-Men number 57 or something, right? And I say to somebody, hey, do you have X-Men 57? I cannot call a comic book store and say X-Men 57. No. Because they're going to say, okay, which volume do you want? And then they say, even if they send me a picture of it, is this the book? I'm like, well, geez, I don't know, because I'm looking here. The cover I have that I'm looking for looks different than that, but it might be the same book. It's a half-hour conversation to figure out if that's the book I want or not. It is. And now they have like these apps in your phone that you can use your UPC code to pull it, and they even can't do it. They can't figure out what book is what from that, and it's just like, oh my God, it's insane. It's too much. Like, what has happened to me? Like, that I have to take a half an hour to figure out which book is which. Now, I've got them figured out for my main titles now, but it's a lot of work, and I could see where there's confusion. I can see people accidentally buying the same book twice. Oh yeah. Or missing out on something because of these kind of things. It's not. They make it hard. It is hard for the collector to discriminate which books to get if you want to be. It's harder and harder to be a completionist, to get all the books on something.
Oh, right? Much
it
harder.
Is difficult to do.
There's someone, there's 20 variants of of a particular issue. So if you're a collector, are you going to go out and buy all 20 of that particular issue just to get, I mean, it doesn't, I won't do that.
No, it's like, it hurts my head, to think about it sometimes. Now, for a while, I was doing that, right? But then I started to realize that, okay, they figured me out, and they're gonna, go into the previews world. Oh yeah, there's like 8 variants of this book. Yeah, okay, just give me all of them, whatever. Because for years I've been getting the Spider-Man books in the mail as a subscription, literally for 40 years. I've had a 40-year continuous subscription. But then I would buy them at the comic book store that I just kept and put away. Like, I just showed my son my 361 of the first appearance of Carnage. I bought at a comic book store, never touched the book. It's been in there. And I've got my reader, which is beat to hell. And that's, even then I had a consciousness of it. I thought, oh, well, when you have a variant, you've got one that you can create and put away, and they can have different covers. It's a little bit fun. Okay, it's not fun when it's this many, right? It's fun when it's maybe 1 or 2, special edition 1, or it's not fun when it's a box of covers. I think the Spider-Man 800 that came out like 4 years ago, they were literally like 60 covers.
Oh yeah, there's some crazy ones. I mean, having said that, occasionally some of these variants have great looking covers, and I do buy sometimes for the artwork. So, sometimes one of the variants has got an absolutely stunning piece of artwork on it, and I will buy just that one because I like the artwork, but that's as far as it goes for me.
Yeah, same here. I have the same artist that I follow, or some a returning artist. I think Steve Ditko, the first Spider-Man artist, first amazing Spider-Man artist, came back after having a fight with Stanley and not being. He came back. I think he did 601. He came back and did 601 as a variant cover to Amazing Spider-Man. So, well, okay, I'm gonna buy that one. But same with you. It's like, I gotta get this one to sort of help the artist out, or whatever. It's a good one. And even me, I like Conan and Red Sonja books too.
Yeah,
and they're fun, like the fantasy. Conan's got a couple, but Red Sonja will literally every month have like 12 to 15 covers.
Crazy,
different artists, like every month they have that. It's like, wow, okay.
And sometimes some of them are good artists as well doing those.
Oh yeah, they really do. But after a while, it becomes pretty hard to discern. You see so much of it. I can't tell Red Sonja from Vampirella, from like, you get the Lucio Perillo or whatever. Like the characters, you can tell that they're sort of rushing through covers, so they all start to look the same. With just different like hair maybe, but they're the same character. It's like, okay, well, this poor artist is working themselves to death, and they're just starting to make the same looking covers. I can't tell one character from the other because they're just getting good at drawing this one thing, right? So it's like, okay, well, it's like losing its specialness because it's everywhere at this point, right?
Okay, Rick, I've got to crack on. I'm sure you have as well. So I'll get this and I'll send it across to you so you can put it up on your channel if you want. I'll definitely put it up on mine. It's been great fun as talking to you again, Rick, and thanks for your knowledge on the comic science.
Sure, that's my specialty, right? I appreciate it, Mark. It's always